Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Politics Today, and in this programme we'll be talking about the increasing persecution of Christians in this country and the political marginalisation that Christians are going through. And this is why we urgently need a commission of inquiry to protect our Christian freedoms that have been handed to us down through the centuries. And in this programme today I'm joined by Belinda Brown, who's the head of media for a new organisation called the Commission of Inquiry into the Discrimination Against Christians, together with Edmund Adamus, who's the Secretary of the Commission of Inquiry into the Discrimination Against Christians, known as CIDAC, which is an organisation established by good friends at Voice for Justice. I'll start off with you, Edmund. It's an absolute pleasure to have you both on the programme, and I'm very grateful for Linda Rose for recommending you going on the programme and for representing her as well. But share with us something about your Christian faith and how you got involved in Christian advocacy.
Well, I've been a very committed Christian from my earliest days. I was raised in what you might call a traditional devout Christian home, and youngest of a large family in the northwest in Manchester. And I actually eventually, after schooling, entered ordained ministry, where I was a priest of the Diocese of Salford in the northwest for about 12, 13 years, up until 2002, 2003. And even though I left active ministry, I nevertheless remained in church-type work, if you like, professionally, mainly with the Archdiocese of Westminster, and then latterly in the field of education-type work, in particular relationships and sexuality education, which, as we know, is a huge controversial landscape, especially where committed Christians are concerned. So, you know, I've never, in various shapes and forms over the last 30 odd years of my adult professional life, I've been very active in, you know, just promoting and supporting various ministries and apostolates that, you know, help Christians live a deeper Christian life, you know. And I'm happy to say I've enjoyed a huge array of ecumenical type projects and initiatives, not least now the work with Voice for Justice UK and our friends there, and this particular project looking at, as you say, various levels of what one might call persecution, small p, of Christians in our society today, which on occasion leads to discrimination and gets all legal and all those kind of things. But so yeah, that's me. I've been around a while.
No, I appreciate that, and I appreciate being on the programme as well, Edmund. And Belinda, warm welcome to the programme. It's good to have you on the programme as well. Can you share how you came to faith in the Lord Jesus Christ and how you actually got involved in media? Because you got that exciting job of actually being behind the scenes and helping make things happen in terms of press releases, setting up interviews and everything else.
I've got a very different background. I probably came from a fairly non-religious background, and I suppose I see it more like a journey. When I was, as a young person, I made a decision. I suppose it was, I started to believe in God. I mean, it's a really long story, but it's probably to do with appreciating the beauty of the world was, you know, and also thinking about it. So it sort of started from that, and I had various levels of Christian practice throughout my life, and then I attended a church for very many years, and I suppose that that was an Anglican church actually, and I actually got to a point where I was what you might call a liberal Christian. I didn't realise that, but I was a liberal Christian, and I kind of got to this point where I did things which were actually very wrong without realising that they were wrong. And then I became very convicted with this sense of how wrong certain things I had done were. It was very powerful that I was doing stuff that was really wrong, and that led me to question my faith a lot more deeply. And then I started a much more serious exploration and was trying to find a home for my faith. And actually, it was during lockdown. I became a Roman Catholic. There's loads more to the story, but that's the sort of that's a very brief overview. So a couple of years ago, I joined the Catholic Church.
And Edmund, you describe yourself as an evangelical Catholic. What does that entail? And what does that actually mean?
There's a book about it actually by the well-known papal biographer George Weigel of the States. And his thesis is very simple, that if we're serious about our Christian faith and our traditions, and then we've got to go out there and proclaim it. That in that sense, it's to be truly evangelical is to go out there into the world, into the community, and profess what you believe with a boldness, not with pomposity, but with boldness and confidence. Yeah, I think confidence probably is the way I would describe any Christian, frankly, that claims to be truly evangelical, that they're not afraid to stand up and witness to Christ, whatever your tradition is, because at the end of the day, your Christian faith, your Christian practice is not about the rules and regulations or doctrines you might keep or adhere to with any particular tradition, though they are important, but your personal relationship with Christ. And that's being evangelical is witnessing to that reality that's part of your everyday experience.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much. And Edmund, you're here today to talk about this new initiative set up by Voice for Justice UK called the Commission of Inquiry into Discrimination Against Christians, also known as CIDAC. Can you just unpack what this is and why it's been established?
Well, I've only been on board since early May, so I'm kind of new to the whole process. But Voice for Justice UK, as you're aware, has been around for a long time in a kind of lobbying, campaigning and Christian advocacy scene. And I think that Linda Rose, who heads up that organisation, and the kind of senior leaders in that organisation have discerned for some time that it was about time that something was done to shed a spotlight or shed a light on the kind of the unspoken nature of the way a lot of Christians feel they are unjustly treated in our society in Britain today. Yes, of course, we've all seen the headline cases. I mean, there's hardly a day goes by without a case being in the news of someone from whatever Christian denomination they hail from being treated really quite poorly, either in their place of work or whatever it may be, and that case going to the courts, etc. And so, that's a reality that we see all the time. But I think what Voice for Justice UK felt was that it's been all well and good and very good that various bodies within government have looked at religious persecution and religious freedoms worldwide, and rightly so, but they've been somewhat reluctant to look at it, shall we say, from the domestic perspective, from at home. And there's all sorts of reasons why that is, politically speaking, as far as I can make out. So there was a sense in which, well, if the corridors of power are not going to do this, if people in Whitehall are not going to look at this persecution within Britain, then we better do it. I think that was basically the conclusion that they arrived at, and so now we have CIDAC, as we kind of affectionately refer to it, to say, well, look, we're going to set up this process. It's a 2-year commission, whereby we can receive testimony from people, and it doesn't necessarily mean people whose issues have got to the law courts. It might not be that. It may be a whole range of people. We will hear their testimony, probe it, assess it, and at the end of which produce a very thorough report with recommendations to government and those in power and influence in society to say, you know, this situation can't go on, it has to improve. And it's not like it's a new thing. You know, there's been other reports and investigations that have been carried out before around these issues. But I think Voice for Justice UK just felt what we need is a platform, if I can call it that, where people feel they can speak freely. It's not a law court, it's not a newsroom, it's not the court of public opinion even. It's a safe space where they can give their testimony. It can be heard respectfully, it can be probed objectively, and hopefully that will produce something that will, you know, take the conversation a bit further in a couple of years from now.
Excellent. Well, I really appreciate what you're doing, which is so important. And Belinda, do you want to share with us why it's so critical that there is a commission of inquiry that will actually look into the discrimination and marginalisations of Christians that we're now facing as our nation has ceased to become a Christian nation, and our politicians in Parliament don't seem to really care at all really about discrimination against Christians in the workplace or in professional life?
I think it's very much part of raising awareness among the population in general about it. I think there's a problem because there's a very misguided association of Christianity is seen very much as being part of the establishment, which in a way it is. And because of this, there's a lack of awareness of the extent of discrimination which is happening to the general Christian population. I've actually been quite shocked. When I took this job, I knew about it, but I didn't know the extent of it. And I think that because of our association, so for example, some religions will be more, say, associated with a specific ethnic identity. And if you look at the way our processes work, there is, although there should not be, there is a kind of hierarchy of protected characteristics. You know, so you'll have sex and gender identity, sorry, get them mixed up, but you know, you'll have the sex-related ones at the top, and then you'll have the ethnic ones. And religion, although they should all be equal, is kind of at the bottom. And we don't have any ethnic identity. I mean, that's the wonderful thing. If anybody who walks into a church, we're hugely, enormously mixed. That's the first thing you see, I think, in any church you go to. So, and then we've got this baggage, actually, which is really inappropriate. And this is one thing that comes out in our questionnaires. We've got this baggage of being associated with the establishment. But we're collecting the views of ordinary Christians, and they really feel very let down by those parts of the church which actually are part of the establishment. We are getting quite a lot of criticism, you know, the feeling that the Church of England is not supporting the views which grassroots. The majority of us are grassroots Christians. It's the same thing with the Catholics. We're getting these comments, a lot of, say, Catholic parents who are really upset about what's happening in Catholic schools. So there's this sidelining of Christians because we're associated with an establishment which we do not identify with. You know, they're letting us down. We don't have any clear ethnic identity. We're completely mixed. So there's been very little attention given to the discrimination against Christians, and actually, it's really quite serious. And in a way, it's sort of the canary in the mine type scenario. You know, if discrimination against if this isn't stopped in its tracks, we're going to end up in a very, very bad place, which I could talk more about, but I think, you know, I think that to a degree which isn't commonly recognised, freedom of speech, which we take for granted, we've been world leaders of freedom of speech. You know, the Americans learnt their freedom of speech for us. I don't think we realise the extent to which freedom of speech actually has its roots in Christianity. And this is something which has really come to my attention recently. For example, if you look at the case of Felix and Goli, the key issue which he won on was that you can hold one set of beliefs, you can think something, but this is completely separate and completely different from your love and care towards a person. You can think something's wrong, but that doesn't mean that you stop loving the person or harm or attack the person. We still love the person. And I think that it's Christianity that's provided this distinction. Yes, I can say I disagree with you about loads of things, but actually we're both human beings, we both get on. And I feel that that is something which, that is a distinction which we are rapidly losing in this society, where now you have to have certain beliefs, and if you don't have those beliefs, you'll sort of be cast out. With Christianity, we're not like that. And it's an interesting point. I was chatting with Linda, and she was pointing out how part of the problem is we've always been so tolerant that we've allowed other people to speak, people who we would disagree with, and this has got to the point where those people have sort of taken the freedom away from us.
Yeah, we're heading down a very authoritarian route. And Edmund, I mean, I think I fully endorse this commission because I think it's an absolute great idea, and I think it's so important to get as many Christians, even our viewers watching today's programme, on record wherever they faced kind of discrimination in the workplace. I mean, there's been some really big high-profile cases where Christians have been sacked from schools, they've been sacked from the NHS for being a nurse for wearing a cross, or on an airline. So we're all familiar with these big high-profile cases. But isn't it so important to get as much evidence as you can from as many Christians you can from a background where they felt that they've been discriminated in the workplace or they've been marginalised? And it's time that Christians said enough's enough, need to present this to Parliament and to say, look, you need to take our voice seriously, because effectively we're the silent majority here, but we no longer want to be silent, or we no longer can afford to be silent for the sake of our society and our nation.
I think that's exactly right. It's those two things in tandem that we can no longer afford to be silent, and we no longer wish to be silent, and that's partly because, as Belinda was speaking there, I was thinking about, yes, we've got these 9 protected characteristics in the Equality Act, all of which are meant to be equally protected, and in a sense they are. Religion is, I would say, technically legally protected, including Christianity, but socially it's morally disrespected, if I can put it that way. And that's why it's important that outside of the ambit of these very high profile cases that do hit the media because they hit the courts, there are untold, probably countless, cases that don't become cases, partly because the individuals concerned don't want to press it that far. They've got all sorts of, understandable fears or legitimate apprehensions that they don't want to pursue it in legal terms, or they're worried about how their wider circle, both in their family and their social networks, of how, if they did kind of stand up and be counted because they've had this mistreatment, would it kind of permeate and poison those relationships? So, people have got all sorts of fears and apprehensions, which I totally understand, which is why the work of the Commission, hopefully when it gets underway, will, if you like, tease those people out of the woodwork. As I said, it gives them a safe space to step forward. I mean, obviously they've still got to kind of, be brave and come forward and give that testimony and go public about it, though we will actually have safeguards in place for people that don't want to put their name out there. They can still give testimony anonymously. But as you rightly point out there, Simon, it is about garnering evidence. And although the Commission isn't a legally appointed body, It will have people who are part of it who do have, come from legal backgrounds. They have some, as I might put it, some legal acumen to probe and decipher the testimony, so that it's not, these cases are not people from the loony fringe. They're real people who've experienced real various levels of discrimination. Now, when I use the word discrimination, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's been a legal boundary that's been crossed, but it may be that they suffered what I would call some degree of hostility or low-level persecution. And that could be anything from continuous ridicule of their Christian faith or their Christian beliefs or Christian practice, to perhaps some really nasty, treatment that they've been subjected to, particularly on social media. So I think in providing a platform where this can be profiled and showcased in a way, it's actually saying to the wider society, look, as Christians, we're not trying to claim special treatment, far from it, but we are trying to say we haven't had any, in some respects, any particular respectful treatment, because as is becoming clear from the survey that Belinda's been looking at, a vast majority of Christians, even though they might say, well, I've not been particularly maltreated or been treated unjustly, but however, I would say that as Christians, we're seen as the soft touch. We're an easy target because we turn the other cheek. We're taught to forgive, and we pray for our enemies, as the Lord taught us to do so, and we do. And that's fine. But just because we believe in those things doesn't mean we're the doormat for society. We don't simply just lie down and take it either. And that comes back to what I was saying earlier about standing up for what you believe in and being bold and being apostolic and evangelical, and not cowering in the corner and almost apologising for your Christian faith.
Don't do this on this programme, I can assure you. And Belinda, for our viewers watching, how can they get involved in the Commission of Inquiry, and if they have experienced discrimination or marginalisation in the workplace, how can they get involved and play their part in this excellent Commission of Inquiry?
I think the first thing which they could do, which would be terrific, is to fill in our questionnaire, which has got a lot of space for providing qualitative data about your situation. And the questionnaire is on our website, Voice for Justice UK website. You must remember the UK. It's on the front page. So, and if you fill in the questionnaire, there are spaces where you can fill in, and you can say if you would like to get in touch and be part of the commission and give your evidence in a more formal manner. You can certainly give informal evidence on the questionnaire, but it can be dealt with more formally. So just put there is space to say that on the questionnaire, or else contact Voice for Justice UK. Just simply write to us you'll find the contact on our website, and get in touch. And please understand, it's all very, very anonymous. The degree to which if you want to remain completely anonymous, that's totally fine. And the questionnaire is certainly completely anonymous. So yeah. I think that's...
And Edmund, we've got about 2 minutes left of the programme. So how important is it to present this evidence and get as many and as much testimonies as you can, and say to our parliamentarians, this is the Christian voice who feel they actually are being marginalised and discriminated against, because here's the evidence, act upon it with legislation and recognise that we are a group to be reckoned with?
I think it's hugely important, Simon, because earlier this year in April, there was an independent review published by the Independent Faith Engagements Advisor, a chap called Colin Bloom, who was commissioned by the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson back in 2019 to look into this question, not specifically about Christians, but to look into the relationship between government and faith. And does government do God? I mean, that's what the report's called. It's a very good review. They had over 21,000 responses to their survey, their own survey, wow, back at the end of 2020. And in that, interestingly enough, although it makes 20-odd recommendations, amongst that, it says that, you know, a lot of people who took part in that survey did feel that religious freedom isn't taken seriously in this country, any religion, not just Christianity, but upwards of 68% felt that Christianity in particular was not dealt fairly with fairly in this country. So that was a kind of government investigation, and that's good to see. So I think the Commission's work can, if you like, piggyback on that programme, that particular review, to say to parliamentarians, look, you had that report, you've all seen it, you've all accessed and taken note of those recommendations. Well, we can now prove that it wasn't just hearsay of those people that took part.
Edmund and Belinda, thank you so much for being my guests on Politics Today. Thank you so much for this programme. Please get involved in this Commission inquiry if you've been discriminated against as a Christian, because we need to let our politicians know. And thank you for watching this week's edition of Politics Today.